And we're facing some incredible challenging times. 10% tariffs across the board.
Canceled orders, trucks turning around, and U.S. companies backing out.
Well, it has a very significant impact. 50% of our lumber goes across the border into the U.S. What we really need to do is stop having conversations and start rolling up our sleeves.
I'm Todd Burgess. I'm the Executive Director of Forest Nova Scotia, and you are listening to Forestry Uncut. When the United States raises tariffs on Canadian softwood lumber, the impact ripples far beyond trade headlines. It hits sawmills, communities, and family-run operations across the country. Now, Ottawa says relief is on the way. The federal government has announced a new financial package of hundreds of millions of dollars in bank-backed loans to help the industry weather these unjustified tariffs and keep mills running. But what will that really mean on the ground here in Nova Scotia? In this episode, we're joined by George Ernst, CFO and Controller at Freeman Lumber, as one of Nova Scotia's oldest and most respected lumber producers. George brings both professional and personal insight as an accountant with more than 16 years in public practice and as someone who works on his own family woodlot and Christmas tree farm. We'll talk about how these tariffs are reshaping the sector, what the new relief measures could actually deliver, and maybe we will be discussing some of the solutions that we can do here in Nova Scotia to solve some of the challenges we have. So welcome everyone to our next podcast. Today we have George Ernst from Freeman Lumber, CFO with Freeman Lumber, joining us. Thank you for coming in, George. We do appreciate it.
You're quite welcome.
So first of all, before we get started with some questions, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Maybe your family, who you work for, history that you have here in Nova Scotia with forestry.
Sure. I grew up in Mahone Bay, Nova Scotia, and grew up in a family of a forestry family. My father worked for Natural Resources at the time and was a Christmas tree specialist, and we work together. I'm the fourth generation to work on our woodland properties. And in my spare time, whenever I can, I still get up and work on the family Christmas tree farm and on the woodlot. And I take my sons up at the same time, who are 13 and 11, and try to introduce them to some of the techniques that we use and teach them a little bit of things that my father taught me.
Right. So your sons, so they're fifth generation now?
They will be fifth generation. That's
so
correct.
A lot of history there. You're the CFO, Chief Financial Officer for Freeman Lumber. They've been around for a while in Nova Scotia. Can you tell me a little bit about them?
So the Freemans started sawing lumber in 1832. So they're one of the oldest family-owned operations in North America. And probably in the last 25, 30 years, two brothers, Richard and Charlie, really scaled up the mill. And it's now the largest sawmill in the province. And saws a variety of species, including spruce, fir, white pine, red pine, and eastern hemlock.
Eastern hemlock, that's an important one, but we're not going to talk about it this podcast right now. But so this is very, very timely. An old mill that's been a family-owned sawmill that's been in the province for many, many years, generations, and yourself who's been here for fourth generation of owning a woodlot. And now we're facing some incredible challenging times. And as we're here to actually talk about some of those challenging times that are in front of us with our trade partner and the administration down south with some new tariffs that have been introduced. Now, Section 232 tariffs, 10% tariffs across the board. Can you tell us a little bit about how this may impact?
Well, it has a very significant impact. And if we think about it a little bit, to put it in perspective, so for our mill, for example, 50% of our lumber goes across the border into the U.S. And those are with longstanding customers. And then customers that we've developed over the past number of years as well. Mm. That 10% applies to us. And a lot of people say, oh, well, we're always exempt from lumber tariffs into the U.S. We're exempted from anti-dumping and countervailing duties that other provinces have to pay for a number of reasons, but primarily two. And one is that the majority of the wood that Freeman's and other sawmills throughout Nova Scotia source comes from private land.
Okay, I think that's important. So most of the wood comes from private land, would you say?
The majority.
The majority comes
Yep.
from private land. Okay.
And when I say majority, it's at least 75% or greater,
Okay.
depending on the mill.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons. And so that aligns us, the province of Nova Scotia, with a number of the states in the U.S. So they look at it and say, okay, well, you guys are pretty similar to us, so we're going to give you an exemption. But we don't want you guys to be getting that money some other way. So a lot of the grants and subsidies that other industries might qualify for, we are not eligible for. So payroll rebates, capital investment tax credits, things like that, the sawmills are not eligible for those things.
Okay.
Nope.
I just want to dive a little bit deeper in that. So even a capital investment rebate, not eligible for a sawmill in Nova Scotia because it would be seen as a subsidy.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. But they can do that in other provinces.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. Right. So they're a part of the Softwood Lumber Agreement, and we are excluded from that agreement here in Nova Scotia.
We have the exclusion on the anti-dumping and countervailing duties. That's
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
So that's an important consideration when we try to find solutions to the forestry sector here in Nova Scotia.
That's correct. And if I can add just one other thing on that, not very much of our fiber supply comes from Crown, but what does come from Crown land is benchmarked against stumpage surveys that are conducted on an annual or semi-annual, biannual, depending on how much things, depending on the frequency. But an independent audit firm comes and selects actual stumpage transactions with private woodlot owners to help establish what the Crown rates would be. So our Crown wood ends up actually being more costly than private in many instances.
Right. So a lot of people may be surprised with that. So the Crown wood, the wood that comes from Crown land, is actually quite expensive, and it's probably some of the most expensive wood in North America, really, if you were to compare it.
It would be. That's correct. Yeah.
However, so that does afford us to ship lumber and solid wood products across the U.S. border tariff-free currently.
Until the recent 10% announcement came along. Yeah.
Okay. So what does this 10%, this extra 10%, it's across the board for even CUSMA compliant goods, what does that mean for a sawmill like Freeman's?
It is a significant impact. So if I think about it in my earlier career as a public accountant, many businesses have a profit margin of less than 10% based off of their 10% of their sales.
Okay.
So picture any business and you carve out 10% of their revenue stream as an additional expense, that puts many businesses underwater.
Okay.
Without getting into specifics of any sawmills or the industry specifically, any business has a very tough time swallowing a 10% change in their cost structure.
So there's not much we're going to be able to do with the 10%. It's raise the prices that you sell your lumber for. Can you just do that? Just say, okay, my lumber is now 10% more.
No, we don't. We really don't have a whole lot of options on pricing front, because the pricing is lumber is very much a pure market or a fair market, in that it's very supply and demand driven. So if there is ample supply out there and not very much demand, then the price of lumber is lower, such as we're seeing right now. So lumber prices were already at a low point here in the current year, and now you also had 10% applied on top of that.
Okay.
Top of that expense. So if the housing demand, if the demand is there and supply is we're not oversupplied, then lumber prices increase. But if there's lots of supply and not much demand, lumber prices become depressed. So there's very little control we have on our lumber pricing.
I believe you have a deep understanding of tariffs and financial implications. So a Section 232 tariff that the U.S. administration has applied to us, can you explain what that actually means?
So the 232 tariff is a tariff on all lumber exported to the United States from the province or from Canada. And basically what that means is if the lumber is sold for $100, there's a 10% tariff or a $10 tariff on that lumber. So that's $10 that is now going to the US government that doesn't stay within Nova Scotia for sawmills to reinvest in equipment, to pay landowners for their stumpage, to pay harvest contractors to harvest the wood, to pay wages for employees within the sawmills. It's a real impact to the forest industry and the sawmill industry within Nova Scotia and the supply chain.
If we can't control this 10% tariff that the administration is throwing on everyone across the country, on top of everything else, what are some solutions that we could do locally here in Nova Scotia to help the forest sector?
There are a number of things that we've been working on that we just can't seem to get across the line. And we'll go in no particular order, but if we start at the supply end of things, as I mentioned, our crown wood is our most expensive wood. Part of it is because it's benchmarked as it should be against private stumpage, but the other challenge is that it is our most costly to harvest because of all of the pre-assessments and post-assessments and quality checks and controls.
Right, all the rules.
All the rules that is in place to operate on government or crown-owned property as opposed to private woodlots.
So someone would say that's probably a good thing. It's owned by all the people of Nova Scotia. We need to have lots of rules to make sure things are done correctly.
Look, we're not opposed to having things done correctly, but it is very frustrating when we abide by those rules, and then but it seems to us as though the rules are always changing. It's very hard sometimes to get things across the line on a consistent basis. But the other part that drives that is the implementation of Leahy, and we've done a very good job of implementing 2/3 of the Leahy report. The part that has not been implemented to its fullest extent and really just tip of the iceberg so far is the high production forestry.
Right.
Which allows us to remove higher volumes in a smaller area, reduce those costs of harvesting.
Right. So here we just so our listeners can understand. So you're an accountant, and we're talking forestry here. So this is good. I know you've got history with some forestry, but for those listeners, maybe they're unaware, the Leahy report came out in 2018, identified 3 parts to what we call the triad model, where we had one part was protection or conservation land, a middle leg that looked after biodiversity as the main goal, and the third leg is a high production leg for timber production. But we haven't really implemented that high production leg yet. That's what I'm hearing.
That's correct. Yeah. And so if we use an example, and let's just say, and we've been operating in the second leg, call it that partial harvest or light touch forestry, and I think we've done a really good job of adapting to that. What happens is it's partial, so you're removing part of the volume of a stand. The road, to put that road in to harvest the stand, to lay out the block, to provide the supervisory oversight, all of those things, the total cost is divided by a smaller volume of wood. Right. It's divided by half or 40% of the volume of wood harvested, as opposed to all the volume that's done in a clear-cut, high-production forestry stand.
Right. So it's more expensive wood.
Agreed. And then the other part of it is we're often leaving the higher quality stems in the partial harvest for future benefits.
Right.
So the quality of the saw logs coming out and the studwood coming out for the sawmills, the quantity is not there as well, and the quality for that matter.
Right. So what you're suggesting here is one of the solutions to combat this tariff that the U.S. administration is putting on Canadians, and more specifically Nova Scotians, is to be more efficient in our forestry operations.
Absolutely, that we need to operate within the things that we can control, which is how do we become more efficient in our expenses.
Okay. Now, that can't be the only solution. What are some other solutions do you see, George?
One of the biggest costs associated with wood as well is transportation. So I know there have been a number of people within the industry who are working to explore opportunities with payloads, with configurations, volumes for certain time of year, a number of things that allow us to, at the end of the day, bring more wood with the same trip.
Okay.
And again, that reduces your cost to the mill.
So higher weights on trucks, maybe better roads?
Better roads, yep.
Okay. What about if we were just to use the lumber in Nova Scotia that we produce? Why don't we just use Nova Scotia lumber? Wouldn't that go a long way?
Absolutely. Now, I will back up. The more lumber we can use in Nova Scotia, the better. And the government has recently announced that they want to prioritize wood construction and the use of wood in government buildings, which is fantastic. So we're fully on board with that. But the reality is that we still need an export business here in order to have a viable industry. As I said, right now, for example, our mill is 50% of our production still goes
to the U.S.
Goes to the U.S.
Okay.
And let's be honest, a business that just maintains status quo and doesn't try to do some things to grow and expand its operations and add value is going to decline at some point in time. So we need to be continually looking at, can we grow we cannot ignore the export market. We need to continually try to grow our local market, and as well look at opportunities for other export opportunities as well.
Okay, so even though it's a little bit off topic, I want to talk about one of the other big challenges in the forestry sector that could help reduce maybe our reliance on the U.S., and that's all the low-grade wood that Nova Scotia has. Why is that such a challenge for forestry in Nova Scotia? I hear that all the time.
Well, I'm not, I've got some hands-on experience with forestry, so I'm certainly not the expert from a technical perspective, but there are a number of reasons. One is that in order to grow forests, you need to conduct thinnings, and you're yielding small diameter wood when you're conducting those thinnings, which not every tree can make a saw log. And if we look at it, it's less than 50% of the tree actually gets turned into lumber. In many instances, because part of the tree doesn't make a saw log to begin with, and then when the saw log goes through the sawing process, you're taking something round and you're turning it into something square. So you're losing a fair amount of your log in what we call byproducts or residuals.
Okay. So for a Freeman mill, you have all this residual chips and sawdust. Where does that go now? What do you do with that?
It's currently being consumed for energy.
Okay.
Yeah, for energy and turned in energy as in electricity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a few of it goes to other spots as well. It'll go to it'll help supply some of the pellet mills, some of the hospitals burn, and then we consume some of it ourselves to heat our kilns in the lumber drying process.
Okay.
Yeah. And if I can back up just one touch and second there as well, Todd, the again, not having a market for those low grade and the residuals in the woods, the low grade roundwood, that in many instances that's being left on the ground today. And if we go back again, that's volume that is not being harvested or extracted to spread those road, supervisory, all those fixed costs that you have with a harvest block. It doesn't help reduce your per unit cost.
Right. So if we could use it, it would improve our efficiency.
It would improve our efficiency and our cost competitiveness.
When I know forestry a little bit, when I see a 10% tariff coming across from the U.S., I see it as just another stab wound in the death of an industry that's sort of struggling. Can we recover from this? Is this something we can recover from?
I'm a glass half full kind of guy. I say yes, but we need to continually work at it. We can't, like, the little things make a difference. So it might so again, we go back to the harvest block, for example. Taking 1 month to approve a harvest block as opposed to 10 days or 2 weeks, that stuff all adds up over time. And
Hmm.
so those are the so to offset the death by 1,000 cuts, we need to make sure we're stopping that bleeding and offsetting that with something else.
Okay, so we need to get more efficient.
We need to get more efficient. The other part to think about here is our competition isn't amongst ourselves in Nova Scotia. When we sell to the U.S., we're competing against mills all throughout Canada, all throughout the U.S., Europe, and even South America.
Okay.
Right? So we need to be we're playing at a high level here, and we're playing against very, very efficient and competitive mills that are highly optimized and have very good, strong, good quality wood coming into them, where forest management's been done for generations and centuries. We're competing against very, very good competitors. And granted, we are also doing a lot of things so that we compete. We're continually reinvesting in our sawmills. We have very good sawmills here in Nova Scotia, but we can't have all these death by 1,000 cuts.
Right.
We do need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to improve efficiencies.
Yeah, so the provincial government can do some things to help become more efficient. Minister Jolie from the federal government and the Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced this $1.25 billion aid package to forestry companies across the country. Is that something that maybe we can accept some money from that big pot of money that they've announced? And what about that? Any thoughts towards accepting some of those federal grants?
Well, we have to be very careful here. If we talk about, if we go back to the anti-dumping and countervailing duties, and one of the other reasons why we've been excluded is we aren't getting federal or provincial subsidies in another form other than in cheap fiber. And so a number of the programs that are put in place for other industries in the province or throughout the country for that matter, we are not eligible for in order to maintain that exemption. So
Okay.
so some of those programs, it's early days and to see what is out there, but the early look is that they may not be applicable for Nova Scotia.
Okay, so the federal government is trying to help, maybe with some funding, but we can't take advantage of it because of our particular situation in Nova Scotia. Do you have any other thoughts as far as what we can do for the forestry sector to speak up, to maybe have government step in or other groups to step in and help us solve the solution? I know of some solutions in my head. I'm wondering, do you have any ideas about what we could do to inspire others to speak up and help out?
Well, communication is key, but what we really need to do is stop having conversations and start rolling up our sleeves and implementing some of the things that we've talked about doing. That's the key, is that we need to really start implementing some of the things and getting them across the finish line that we've talked about doing. So again, we talk about the three legs of the Leahy report, getting the third leg across the line, which is high production forestry, which hasn't been done. We've had pilot projects in government buildings now for 4 or 5 years.
Let's get some district heating going.
Let's get some district heating going. Exactly. It's not, these things are not things that are huge spends. They provide benefit to the local economy, and we're not talking high technology risk or anything there. Look, we know that there's a number of opportunities out there with some higher technology options and conversions into biofuels and some other opportunities like that. But but there are a number of things that we can do that are known technologies. We just need to do them and stop talking about them.
Right. Right. I know we produce pellets here in Nova Scotia that we've got opportunities to expand that business even.
Guess where most of the pellets go that are produced in Nova Scotia?
For Europe,
They're
probably.
they're exported. That's
They're
right.
exported. So it baffles me actually how we can do that. We can produce pellets here, send them on a boat overseas to Europe, and they can produce energy out of it in Europe. But we really don't do it very well here in our own province. We could probably use those pellets here, could we not?
Absolutely. We don't have an oil refinery here in Nova Scotia, so we're importing all the oil that we burn. We import natural gas and we import coal, so we're importing a lot of our energy
Okay.
while we're exporting energy to Europe.
Right. How do we get decision makers or maybe some ideas that have been put in front of government to actually make that happen?
In our business, we set targets. So we say we want to saw X number of volume of lumber this year. How are we going to go out and do it? And we need to hold the people accountable to achieving those targets. And I think that all of us as within the sector need to make sure, we need to hold our MLAs and we need to hold our elected officials accountable to hitting the targets that they put out in front of us.
Okay.
Let's stop saying we're going to do something.
And actually do it. Okay, so what does Freeman, if you don't meet your sawable targets or you don't meet your production targets at Freeman Lumber, what happens?
It
Do people lose their job?
It has a direct impact on our bottom line. So if we don't hit our targets, then we have to do things to scale back, change our course of direction. So if we don't hit our targets and we figure out why, and then we figure out a way to say, okay, well, what are we going to change to get there?
Recently, you and I, George, were on this call that was put together by Intergovernmental Affairs to actually coordinate ideas and efforts from people in the forestry sector so we can have a coordinated response to this CUSMA renegotiation. Do you have any thoughts on that, George? Did anything we need to do there, or?
Yeah, so let me back up. That department has done a very good job. They've proactively reached out to us numerous times as this trade uncertainty has loomed.
So, George, as I think about this meeting that Angela Paulin just had from Intergovernmental Affairs with leaders of our sector, that was a good step in my mind to advance forestry's issues when we renegotiate CUSMA and we talk with the federal government. But in order to keep forestry's ideas at top of mind of these provincial leaders, especially, let's just say, the Natural Resource Summit with the Premier, we need to continue with our ideas and ensuring that they are following through on the thoughts that we have to advance forestry and keep forestry sustainable in Nova Scotia. Do you have any thoughts on how we can continue to do that, to make sure that they hear our voices?
Well, those regular conversations and touch points are critical, and I know that that we are continually meeting with Angela and her group to continue advancing our thoughts and our related to international trade, specifically for tariffs and for other duties and exemptions. And we appreciate everything that's been done for us in the on that file so far, and we look forward to continuing having that dialogue so that our position is represented.
Right. As far as the federal negotiation with CUSMA, I think there's probably some other things that we can do as an industry to get together a little bit more frequently, or maybe through Forest Nova Scotia, to actually talk with government and have them actually listen to our ideas. I know they've listened to them, but we have a lot of ideas that we've put forward.
Agreed, and it's also an education piece because I suspect, some of our MPs do not understand the unique position that Nova Scotia has when it comes to softwood lumber, and we need to make sure that our MPs understand why we have a unique position, that unique position is important to us, not just important but critical,
Right.
so that we can ensure we're well represented during the negotiation process or any negotiation.
And they're not going to
processes.
learn that on their own. We're going to have to get together and actually, meet with them and say, this is how it is. And these are the solutions that we think can help solve these particular problems.
That's right. That's on us. We need to force the issue.
If you're listening to the podcast, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. We would love for you to subscribe, like, and share it with people that maybe you know or other people in the sector. If you want to learn more about Forest Nova Scotia, the organization that I work for, you can go to forestns.ca. That's our website. You can click on there, listen to our podcast, and find out more information about forestry and the forest sector in Nova Scotia.